doesn't it ask you? Anyway, welcome everyone. I think one more person, Frederic, is coming in.
Yeah, that was the struggler with ID. So we managed.
Good. Well, welcome to the Asian Coaching Supervision Network. It is just about 7:10 on the Pacific time and about 12. Where is it in Asia? Andrew?
12 noon in Tokyo.
12 noon in Tokyo. So I welcome all of you. Today's or this evening, depending on what time zone you're in, we're going to be looking at a little bit about cognitive diversity. And I spent most of the week in training around diversity issues. So this is also very interesting for me because each time it gets to be a much larger, much more in-depth examination. So I hope this is helpful because I didn't stumble on this, but someone gave me sort of a clue or a key about diversity. I'd stopped using the word and was only using difference in most of my presentations because I think the word itself has gotten really out of proportion and distorted. A lot of individuals are using diversity as an adjective, using it in the context of describing someone like a diversity candidate for a job, and it's very inappropriate. So just to capture, I started using difference, and that when someone shared with me that cognitive diversity was about difference, and it's almost used simultaneously with neurodiversity. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it particularly, I think, applies to what the work we do in coaching supervision. So let me get started, because again, we have a limited amount of time. Trying to find my PowerPoint. Here we go. All right. Can you all see this?
Yes.
I'm a little bit, I can't even find the Zoom is a little bit covering everything. So I'm going to move it over here. I cannot see you, so we were working on that earlier, but so please keep me informed if anything happens and you cannot see something. So from the beginning, this is cognitive diversity. Again, Asian Coaching Supervision Network. And did any of you at all get a chance to read or look at the pre-work? It was an article that I wrote that got published about this time last year in a coaching magazine, Choice. And it was also published in Medium. And I think that was the one that we gave you the link to. Did anyone, you'll have to say yes, because I can't see. Anyone get a chance to read that?
Yes.
Yes.
Two people at least, okay. One of the reasons why I gave that.
I did last time.
Excuse me?
I did last time.
You did last time, okay. Well, then you know that I use the article as a demonstration or an example of looking at things differently, having a different perspective, which is what cognitive diversity is really all about. It's about differences in information styles and processing styles. And this quote I actually took from Peter Hawkins, one of the first times I actually met with him and was in a supervision group. He said, there's always a half-life of what is not said, so that together with other issues unsaid, it is never lost and ultimately emerges in what a coach shares consciously or unconsciously. And that stayed with me because there's so much work now being done about around energy and coaching. I just came from a meeting where they talked about if you keep your phone on the desk, even if you're not looking at it, and even if you're not talking or looking at your phone, the person you're coaching feels less connected with you. And when you put your phone away, you cannot see it. They feel more connected. They've actually done a study. So those kinds of connections can be transmitted from one person, even over Zoom, and even, when you're not personally with that person. There's also some examples of historical cognitive diversity, and this one I was particularly struck by because all of you are probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this theory was actually built on the wisdom and sophistication of First Nations societies. When Maslow actually lived with the Blackfoot Nation in Canada is where he began to explore this whole idea of actualization. And I'll show you a little picture from an article, if you can all see this. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was informed by the Blackfoot Nation. And you can see on the left, this pyramid that goes up to self-actualization, where the indigenous tribes actually started on the bottom. That's where self-actualization actually was. The individual rights, privilege, one lifetime scope of analysis, where this one was more expansive, the concept of time in multiple dimensions of reality. So this is an entirely different perspective that I think we have adopted in the Western perspective about achieving self-actualization, when indigenous people actually started with that concept. The less people have, the more satisfied they were in their society rather than the other way around. Any questions about that? I can also give you the link to this article before we're done if you'd like to read more about it.
Thank you for offering that.
Yes.
Please, that would be great.
Okay. So cognitive diversity is, as I said, even started earlier. IBM as a company started to hire back in 1999 individuals on the autism spectrum. And actually that increased their productivity. It helps teams also solve problems more. It can help coaches in supervision see different perspectives, and more consciously or unconsciously, we must begin to embrace difference. I want to play this little video for you so you can get a sense of some of the research that has been done.
Conventional wisdom tells us that more diverse teams are also more productive, and previous research has also found that to be true. But when Allison Reynolds and David Lewis studied more than 100 executive groups over 12 years, they did not find a correlation between demographic diversity and performance. Then they looked more closely at the differences that go beyond gender, race, and age. Differences in perspective or information processing styles known as cognitive diversity. They tested 6 teams using a psychological assessment tool called the AEM Cube that measures the different ways people approach change. What they found was a significant correlation between high cognitive diversity and high performance. Teams with a wider variety of thinking styles completed a performance challenge more quickly. But it isn't easy to embrace different thinking styles at work, where there's often pressure to fit in. In another study, Reynolds and Lewis asked 32 managers to self-assess their own cognitive diversity using the AEM Cube, and the results showed a wide range of thinking styles. When they were assessed on the same scale by their own direct reports, however, the results were much less diverse. The managers seemed to be sending a conformist signal without even realizing it. If the key to dealing with complex situations is to think outside the box, leaders need to let their teams know that it's okay for them to be themselves.
So what did you think about that? Some of you also do a great deal of teamwork, isn't that right?
Yes.
One of the things that impressed me, and I want to emphasize though, is that with the studies that have been done on cognitive diversity and ethnicity and difference in background, it doesn't mean that those things are not relevant. As a matter of fact, they contribute even more to diverse thinking, to differences in approaches and differences in processing. So here, the Allison and Reynolds study shows you that cognitive diversity here on the vertical axis and the psychological safety, that when the psychological safety is high and cognitive diversity is high, you get a much more generative results. Can you imagine the teams that you work with or the groups that you work with? Where do you think they might fit in any one of these 4 quadrants?
I can share. It's Inga, Sunny, in case you still cannot see. I'm thinking about this, what I noticed during team coaching when I work with teams, that teams need to, like, they need to learn to be different together. So at the beginning, there is this kind of resistance going on. So I would say like oppositional when the diversity is high, and this resistance sometimes, especially when there are people who are controlling, is showed up with a higher conflict. So it's almost like trying, like through team coaching and their own work as a team, they're looking for the sweet spot.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of discussion about we are different, so how can we work together, and so on, so on. And maybe in a more homogeneous teams, there are less conflict, but creativity is less present, like innovation is less present. You know, this pressure of best practices, which shows up all the time. So I would say that at the beginning, they are definitely resistant, controlling, focus more on this, how different they are, and there are some conflicts showing up, but with some time they learn how to be together, and it's more on experimentation and curiosity. So there is a transition going on there as well.
Yes. And there's a definite relationship between that and psychological safety, because that discomfort is one of the things that really causes this tendency for everyone to be alike. I've been in coach situations where I'm sure some of you have, where coaches are even asked a question and nobody answers it. I was in a session yesterday all day, and there was an ask for a volunteer, and the room was full with 15, 20 coaches and nobody volunteered. This is, tendency for people to move all towards each other. It took a long time for one person to raise their hand. It was only among, a very fairly intimate group. Any questions about this or other comments?
My only comment is about psychological safety and how that is defined, or how that is valued according to the culture in which it is practiced.
I'm sure, was that Andrew who said that?
Yes. That is
I think Andrew, probably with this particular study, again, both Allison and Reynolds worked with executives in a corporate setting. So I'm sure the psychological safety was in alignment with the culture and that corporate culture. But I think that could apply again to coaches and to other, groups and other cultures in a business situation. It will be interesting to see, or to be able to actually sort of utilize the approach in the study in other groups.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, how many do we have, Inga, people?
We have 9 people all together. So with you.
Okay, and without me, then can we have 2 groups of 4?
Of course, I'm creating those right now.
And what I'd like you to do is to see in your group, just discuss with each other. Well, we can put this in the chat, but I'm not sure you'll really need it. This scenario, you're throwing a birthday party for a 7-year-old, and 8 people will be in attendance, just like the 8 people here. You're baking a cake, and you want to make sure that all the children are happy and satisfied. So you need to make sure that each child gets the same amount of cake from the birthday party. Does everybody get that? But there is a caveat. Here's the catch. You must cut the 8 equal slices with only 3 cuts of a knife. Okay? So Inga, send them away, and we'll bring you back in about 3 minutes. You'll discuss it among each other and see whether you come up with a solution.
Okay, so I'm just doing the print screen for everybody of the slide, and I will send it via chat now. It's not perfect, so forgive me. But
it's not too complicated. I trust people who will be able to remember.
Okay. Okay. Oh my God. Technology is not serving us today. best.
Okay, I'm gonna come out and stop share.
Mhm. Okay.
How's it going?
So I'm putting this in chat right now for everybody.
And one person at least may know the answer, but you can't share it. Do you remember the answer, Genevieve? We can't hear you.
So I
Yeah, I
tried.
think I remember, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay,
Okay, so I created the print screen in the chat box for everybody to download, and I opened all rooms now. Sunny, how much time do we have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Wow.
Okay, you can make it 5. I think people will do this very fast. I have quite a lot of confidence in the
Okay.
American Supervision Network folks. Go
Okay.
ahead. We've got one room of 3.
Yeah, one room with 3, and I can join this room if it's okay with
Okay, you go ahead and join that room, and I'll bring you back.
you. Okay.
And there you go. Sydney, you're still here with me. You were supposed to be here. And I'm going to move you to room 1. What happened? Sydney Davis moved to room 1. Good. What happened? I guess. There we go. I want her to go to room 1. When she's in room 1. Why is she not? No, leave her there. Why isn't she? She's in room 1. No, why she didn't join? I don't understand this. These people are talking, but I can't get her to move anymore. Did she just leave? Oh, Sydney.
Sunny, do you want me to gather everybody?
Yes, give them, I'm giving it to them now. It's about
Oh,
56
okay,
seconds.
wonderful.
I lost Sydney though.
Oh,
So
Sydney connects with us, and
I
then
kept trying to move her and she wouldn't move.
oh, okay, but
Okay.
but she disappeared. Maybe something with the internet connection as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Got about 33 seconds and we'll all be back together. So how did you guys do? You come up with a solution?
Yeah, we had.
How long
one-
did you think it took? The end, how long did it take? Here they come.
If the question is how long did it take, I think Frederick cracked it in under 1 minute.
I love it.
Oh.
So how was yours? Leanne and Herman, how long did it take? Did you come up with a solution?
Yes, very quickly.
I must say that we had two solutions.
Okay, go ahead, let us hear it.
Okay, so Andrew, could you explain your solution?
My solution was the first cut would be a circle in the middle. So it'd be circular in the middle. So it'll be equal distance. And then you have one vertical cut and one horizontal cut. Then you have you have 8 pieces, roughly the same size. Or if you measure correctly, the circle in the middle, you could have equal size pieces.
But the middle circle would not be the same size as the other ones that were cut this way and that way, right?
Well,
Horizontal.
it would be one circular cut in the middle. So it'd be,
Right.
yeah.
We just decided that this is the cake for mathematicians' kids. You know,
Yeah.
mathematicians are in a room, they will measure everything right, the area of circles, and it will be fair somehow.
Well,
But
I can tell you, because I, in my family, have a group of 7-year-olds and they do measure how much someone got and how much someone didn't get.
that's
Yeah.
why we have second solution, which Herman come up with. So Herman,
Herman, go
I
ahead.
think that's because I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I live in perpetual justice issues.
Yes.
So my thing was, look at it three-dimensionally. First of all, slice it in half from the standpoint of, well, from one standpoint, and then you look at it from the side, slice it in half. Then you look at it from the top, north, south, east, west. You got four pieces.
Now, Andrews, I'd never heard of before. One time I did this with a group of people in the legal department, and one person came up with the fact that they just went out and got cupcakes. So we're all the same size. Right. But the point here is that the more people that you have input and the way you look at things, you'll have a different perspective. The likelihood of coming up with a solution or an approach is much higher. We just have a few more. This is where we left off, was with the birthday cake. Someone read this quote for me. Read it out loud, please.
I can do that. It's Leanne. Colleagues gravitate toward the people who think and express themselves in a similar way. As a result, organizations often end up with like-minded teams. After studying the subject for several years, they point out that, unfortunately, this lack of cognitive diversity has two impacts. First, it reduces the opportunity to strengthen the proposition with input from people who think differently. Second, it fails to represent the cognitive diversity of the employee population, reducing the impact of the initiatives.
Yes, and that actually came from that Allison Reynolds and David Lewis study that we looked at a little while ago. So I have experienced this, even in terms of one of the things that they research shows that makes cognitive diversity work more is inclusion. And when I've been in a group that I did not feel very inclusive, it didn't feel very creative, and I didn't feel like there were a lot of out of the box thinking, because everyone tended to gravitate towards the way others thought. Now, this is one little continuum that I found in terms of ways to boost cognitive diversity in coaching and supervision. And one of the things that's interesting is a lot of this has to do with what we already know, but maybe are not always mindful of. Lead with an open spirit of humility, vulnerability, and trust. Be courageous and challenge systems with an innovation in mind, share and debate. Practice active listening and critical reflection, which I think most coaches do. Create space for everyone and recognize marginalized voices, the people who are really quiet, who may normally not say very much. It doesn't mean that they don't have value, substance to offer. And then instill compassion. Again, here is inclusivity and understanding. And this means even with things that seem to not be quote unquote right or not to go right, that's taking, as coaches, especially in supervision, the judgment out of the process and out of the thinking and the way we approach things. There's nothing, and I often say this in my supervision groups, there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad. It's just what it is. So if you have input or you have a perspective, that's what we want to hear. We want to make the space. Sometimes the space is just silence, giving people a chance to really process and to think. Any comments, or can you share how this relates to your supervision experience?
Sunny, I've got a question.
Sure.
I'm just curious, and I want to get it out of the way so I can be with you for the rest of this. When you say cognitive diversity, are you talking about the same thing like Robert Kagan would talking about like increasing cognitive complexity, or all those other, like vertical leadership development, where people see things at a different, or process things at a different level? Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about?
It's very, very similar, but actually what people don't realize, that cognitive diversity probably came before those concepts. And that's why it was interesting for me, because the diversity that we hear about right now in today's world is very different than that, and it's founded in something very different, but it's very similar. Even when you talk about how people think and, you know, cognitively, as I said, some of this is even termed neurodiversity. It's about how the brain works and how we all think differently. So it is very, very similar, Herman.
So Steve, if I may continue a little bit, you know, and then if you connect that with like Wilbur's stuff and spiral dynamics, they would talk about achieving a certain level that has such an appreciation for all the pre-existing levels, whereas until you reach that level, you don't yet see beyond you. So if someone was at an earlier stage, they would have a harder time interacting with a higher stage. If you're at a higher stage or a later stage, as they often want to say instead of higher, they respect the lower stage, earlier stage.
Well, just like one of the things that this cognitive diversity in terms of its conceptual is almost like appreciative inquiry, but it does not set up this hierarchy. There is no higher or lower stage. It's just difference. So there's not a judgment embedded in that. It is fundamentally just what it is. It does not judge, it does not rate or rank. And I think those particular approaches actually, for instance, almost like the Maslow, you know, structure actually was more limiting than it is open. And there are lots of ways to look at things and lots of approaches, lots of methodologies that I'm sure have developed and that people have generated. But cognitive diversity is just what it's open to all kinds of thinking, all types, and there isn't really a hierarchy to it. And if they've done studies that, you know, I think from what you're saying, I could see a very hierarchical approach would actually be more limiting rather than inclusive. Does that make sense?
You know, and that's an issue that people who deal with the hierarchy have to deal with. Like Wilbur says, you know, yes, there's hierarchies, but it's not judgmental. It's just recognizing there are differences. And that, you know, sometimes, because I think there's an element of saying there's a way to be at a cognitively complex thing where you really appreciate all the different ways of seeing and taking perspectives. Whereas you may get stuck into one particular perspective if you're from an earlier thing. Anyway, so
well,
some.
no, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to put it out to the group, because I still see that if you have a hierarchy and you must go through level 1 or 2 or 3 to get to 4, you're excluding, you know, approaches. Maybe that's not relevant, or it's not correct. Do other people see that differently?
Sunny, I can see Cian with hand risen.
Excuse me?
I can see Cian
Yes.
with hand risen, so I will give him voice.
Thank you
Okay.
for that. Thank you for that, Inga. And I was so caught up with the discussion between Herman and Sunni. But here's a thought that I have here. I was looking at the slide you had put up, Sunni, and it says ways to boost cognitive diversity in coaching and supervision. Okay, and then we talk about the 5 elements to boost it: humility, innovation, listening, active listening, creating space, and understanding. And I think when we are talking about be it coaching or supervision or even leadership, you know, what Herman brought in, I think the real focus has to be not in terms of focusing on diversity as much as on inclusion.
Yes.
It is inclusion that we need to be focused upon. And I think it's very significant for me that when we talk about diversity, we always tend to think in terms of cognitive diversity. It's the mind, it's the brain, it's the thinking. And that comes that's powerfully driven by who we are. We are driven by our wants, our needs, our desires, our egos, our qualities, our limiting beliefs. And it's stuff like that that we bring into the fore. And that is what probably creates this the differentiation that we see around. Whereas, if you look at the 5 that you have listed, humility, innovation, ability to have patience, to listen, okay, to be curious, to know what the person will say after the person has finished saying.
Yes.
Okay, not to know what, not to listen, to question and think and parse and judge.
Yes.
And creating space, trust, understanding. These don't come from the personality drives of wants, needs, and desires. That comes from deep within.
Mm-hmm.
Because these are endowments all of us possess, but we bury deep within ourselves.
Yes.
And so probably when we are talking about, in the face of cognitive diversity, to bring inclusivity, it is just promoting one's ability to go from the head to, for want of a better word, to the heart.
Yes.
To bring out that connection from within. And if we can do that, I guess, for me, that's the message when I saw this. And it's such a beautiful chart. Thank you for sharing this, Sunni.
I think that you actually just even got ahead of us, because that's one of the principles of this approach to difference, is that inclusive, again, is the glue. It's the key.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you one other little short video that speaks to that. When you face a new, uncertain, or complex situation and everyone agrees on what to do, find someone, it says, who disagrees, and then cherish them. Leaders should embrace differing viewpoints and sometimes welcome uncomfortable, constructive criticism. This can be challenging. However, the ability to do this may become one of the hallmarks of effective leadership. Almost very close to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive diversity is about having different ways of thinking. If you think about diversity meaning an array of things that are different, a lot of times in culture, we're meaning about external things, your skin color, your gender, your height, your age. Cognitive diversity is what's inside your head. A lot of those things do correlate to thinking differently. If you've seen the world differently, the world has seen you differently, chances are you do think differently. But cognitive diversity is about perspective. It's how you frame things that come in, how you take your observations and put them in your own internal language. And it's about heuristics, which is how you approach solving problems. If you have a group of people who can do those things differently, you have cognitive diversity. Cognitive friction is about when you take perspectives and heuristics from different people who think differently and have them do battle. It's when you explore solutions to problems, you explore ideas or intellectual territory from different perspectives. That's when there's discomfort because you're getting outside of your own way of thinking, but that discomfort leads to growth, just like muscle building, just like other areas where you need to push further than you've gone before if you want to get better.
So this is where I wanted to show something that I came up with last year about this comfort and discomfort, and what leads to what the speaker was saying about growth. And moving along this continuum is your ability to be more flexible and to be more agile in terms of how you think about difference and about race in supervision. And it very much parallels what we were just talking about. What happens to you either physically, but that's tied very much to your emotional and your mental state of being. But the awareness here is the key about moving. And he talks about cognitive friction. And if you can become accustomed to that, meaning actually make friction a norm, but not have the discomfort to the point where you withdraw. You have the ability to have discomfort on certain levels about certain things and be aware of that, even articulate it, makes a difference in terms of especially supervision and group supervision. I think you can bring out, again, this point of being much more inclusive rather than pushing people away or making them. That's where this psychological safety comes in. And some of it is not the kind of safety that you might think, that everybody gets along and everyone says the same thing. The safety comes in being used to and having the discomfort at times be a norm. Comments, questions, criticisms, we'll take anything.
Tony,
Yes.
interesting what you just said, because, earlier I was thinking about things like, well, vertical leadership development that some people are talking about now, and also Mesereau's thing about transformative learning, where they say it's critical to have either heat experiences or disruptive things, otherwise no learning exists. And when I saw your original slide about psychological safety, I thought, I was always a believer in psychological safety, but I never put the two together. Psychological safety, I think I was misinterpreting as, oh, it feels comfortable.
Yes.
It's just gotta feel like we can argue, we can fight nice, and therefore we can discover our disruptive experiences. We can see the world in a new way, because you can have Mesereau would say you can have transformative learning without having a disruptive experience. And Petrie says you can't have vertical leadership development without the heat events.
Yes.
So I think you've incorporated it nicely in that last slide, because you put me at rest finally when I saw the psychological safety thing, and I was bound with this notion of disruptiveness that's needed for transformative learning. Thanks.
I just shared in the chat the poem. One of my group supervision member shared with us, Invitation to a Brave Space, when we were talking about what is psychological safety. And I really love this poem, and it relates very much to Herman. You just said that it's not about lovely-dovely, fuzzy feeling like, oh, it's nice, but we are brave to meet, to hold the space for each other. And I think about this. I've been using this poem now a lot with my supervisees, either group or individual ones, in order to create this space, because it gives a little bit more flavor for me. It is still aligned with what Amy Edmiston was writing about psychological safety, but the word brave space, I don't know, I feel that it has some power for me.
Yeah, it's either brave space or I've heard courageous space.
If I may, Sunny and everyone, I find the discussion very, very interesting and generative. And because we are different people, the next discussion is really different from the one we had last time. And you remember, Sunny?
Yes.
And
yes.
one more thing is that when you ask coaches or supervisor why they connect or why they come somewhere, most of the time people will say, because I want to meet like-minded people.
Right.
Which is a mistake.
Yes.
Because if you're always meeting like-minded people, then we just stay,
The same.
together, bringing something new. So this is a very, very tricky expression that people say most of the time. We want to meet like-minded people.
Because in another supervision group, which I think you've been to, and Inga, I think you've been, the ACSN, one of the things that was asked of the coaches there who were supervisors, take a look at your constituents, the people that you work with, your clients. How different are they than you? And that was just the question put out to them. No one really ever answered them. But if you took a spreadsheet and you put all your clients in the last, 5 years, on a sheet, and then you checked off boxes of their characteristics, just generally, where they're from, languages they speak, disabilities, gender, all those things, how different would they be from you even? And I'm not, again, asking all of you, but it's just a question that we sometimes should ask ourselves. It may or may not indicate that you have a cognitively diverse group. But even in group supervision, I really question, I don't think there's anyone who's done any studies about that, whether it really makes a difference in group supervision. Because I'm conducting 3 groups now, and one of them is a BIPOC group. They're a group of individuals of color, and the other 2 are just people who volunteered. And I really can't tell you right now, I think the other 2 groups are much more interesting than the BIPOC group, to tell you the truth, but I don't know why. I'm not saying that there's a reason that all of the individuals in the BIPOC group think alike. I don't necessarily know that. I mean, it's just very interesting to me, you know, but the more diverse, the more interesting, the more different. And, you know, as you were pointing out, inclusiveness is what really causes this to come together. The openness and the maybe even intentional, hopefully, inclusiveness of difference.
And this is definitely one of the challenges of our profession.
Yes.
To be able, yeah, absolutely, as coaches or supervisor, to really be able to work with people from all walks and people, different people, you know, because the discussions to beginning with is already generative. You get something different when you are different than when you are like-minded people.
And should we put that as part of our intention, our vision, and our mission for what we do in supervision?
I have a thought now.
Okay.
And I will share it.
Okay.
Because, or maybe doubt. Usually when we start whatever, like group or teamwork, and I'm not only thinking about the supervision, but training, team coaching, group supervision, and so on. The first thing we do, we actually try to unify everybody with guiding principles or contract or some like rules of behavior, whatever you want to call it.
Usually guiding principles, or yes.
And I'm thinking about that as the force to unify. Yeah, let's unify everybody. Let's look for the common thing. And I'm curious now for myself, how would I actually want to create guiding principles, acknowledging this cognitive diversity, like include diverse voices somehow, yeah? Because most of this, like, if you really think about this rules, and I don't want to sound horrible here and cynical, but they are like similar from group to group, yeah? Like respect, like listen to each other, and so on, so on, even if we dig deeper. And usually when the like different voices show up, we try to unify it. So on the one hand, all the data Sunni presented us with tells us, yes, diversity and including everybody with diverse perspective is wonderful. Let's have it more of it. But a lot of practices we actually do as group facilitators are practices of unifying everybody or creating some homogeneous practices. I don't know, this thought just occurred to me that this is a paradox a little bit of our work.
Yeah, I agree, Inga. I can see that. Because that's one of the things that, again, I'm doing these 3 supervision groups, and I had each one of them come up with their own guidelines. And it's interesting, maybe that is the source of some research actually to take a look at. Very interesting. I have put in the chat an article about cognitive diversity, and then the one about Maslow's approach to his hierarchy of needs that you asked about, Andrew, if you'd like to take up.
Oh, wow. I just wanted to add on to Inga's comment. I mean, just even experience that I had personally at some of the, America's coaching supervision conference, where people are asked to kind of get up and dance or go to the music. And if you're not doing that, or if you don't want to do it in the moment, there's an implied pressure that you're not participating or you're not positive enough. Even that, the intention, of course, is to bring everybody together. However, how do you frame that in a way that would actually honor cognitive diversity? Would it mean that you are very welcome to it? If you're not, just be in the space. How do you introduce those kinds of interactions in a way that honors everyone? I mean, people may come, cognitive diversity also means acknowledging and respecting people who happen to be in a certain mood in the moment due to whatever experience they've had before showing up to an interaction. Something to think about. Thank you.
It's certainly something we should be mindful of, that is for sure. And I have been in those spaces too, where I didn't feel included, but everybody just went ahead and marched on with what they thought was wonderful. And I wasn't in tune or really ready to do that. And
I don't even have the space in my room to wave my arms around or dance or what have you either. So, I mean, that's another thing.
So we all need to learn from each other, because we're not ready yet, we're not there yet. So we tend to judge, even if it is unconscious. We need to think that the other person might not be doing the right thing and doesn't know how to do it. So we just stare at the person like curiosity, not the good one, but I totally agree with you guys.
Maybe it's that we should at least, out of respect, check in and see where people are. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and it's 8:01. So I really thank you for coming. And a couple of people, it's their second time around, but that was very helpful, I think, to all of us. It really gave me a very different perspective from the one that we did in November. So, and again, I put 2 references in the chat. If you'd like to look at those articles, you can just copy that or just save the chat. Any last words as we move on?
Just thank you. Very thought-provoking. Yeah, I appreciate the space and everybody's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will all see you moving on into the new year, cognitively diverse.
And I'm putting a reference of a book in the chat box. And the title is Leading Below the Surface, How to Build Real and Psychology Safe Relationship with People Who Are Different from You. And it's from Latonya Wilkins.
Okay. Thank you, Genevieve. That's very helpful.
I'm so happy, Genevieve, that you shared it. Latonya is my friend, and I love this book. So I'm so happy that you just recommended it.